really an incredible moment at Garfield High School. But Garfield High School has a proud tradition of teaching the arts. We have one of the greatest jazz bands in the country. As you said, Jimi Hendrix went to Garfield and Quincy Jones went to Garfield. We have a long tradition of teaching our kids to think creatively. And, you know, Quincy Jones ended up producing the album Thriller, so I'm so glad that he didn't have to be subjected to this map test and have his confidence killed and not produce one of the greatest albums of all time. And I think it's that tradition of creativity and teaching kids to think critically that has led our school to take this bold stand. The teachers at Garfield High School voted unanimously with only 3 abstentions to refuse to give this district-required test because we feel this is a civil rights issue. This is a test that was brought to Seattle under complete scandal. The former superintendent, Maria Goodloe Johnson, sat on the board of the company that produced the test and didn't disclose that when the Seattle Public Schools purchased the MAP test for over $4 million. Now, it's not me who has a problem with that. It is the state auditor of Washington State that came and found that that was, quote, an ethics violation and, quote, a conflict of interest. But really, that's the best part of the MAP test. But this test is a test that is not aligned to our curriculum. So our kids in 9th grade algebra are getting geometry questions that are not being taught to them in that grade. And so what that means is it's setting them up for failure. And we didn't get into this job as teachers to set our kids up for failure. And what's worse, this evaluation is tied to our evaluation. The MAP test is part of rating teachers. And so when you have kids taking a test that isn't tied to what we're teaching in the classroom, and then they can tie that to our evaluations, it's terribly unfair. And finally, I think one of the main reasons why this was a unanimous vote of teachers was really an equity issue. One, you have special education students don't have their IEPs or individual education plans respected so that there aren't proper accommodations for our special ed students on this test. And then me as a history teacher, when I assign research projects, we often find that the computer labs are booked for weeks because the MAP test is administered on a computer. And so our children aren't allowed to use the library and the computer labs for research for way too long because of this MAP test that's administered 3 times a year. And so the students that have computers at home can still continue the research, but those primarily low income and students of color who don't have as much internet connectivity at home, they lose out. And so this was a civil rights issue, and we've learned from the past that when you're dealing with a civil rights issue, a boycott can be a very powerful tool. And that's what we've done at Garfield High School, is boycotted the MAP test.
Well, Jesse, Superintendent Jose Banda told King 5 News that he's received emails from teachers who support the MAP test and see value in it, that it helps identify areas of weakness and strength among students. He insists that canceling the test is not in the interests of students.
I don't think it's fair to students. You know, what we're forgetting about in this whole equation is that this really is about students. Not everyone has or shares the same sentiment that some of these teachers do, meaning the teachers from Garfield and some of these other schools.
Let's bring in Professor Wayne Au. If you could respond to Superintendent Jose Banda.
Yeah, you know, to me, it's ironic. You know, I respect Superintendent Banda. I know he came into the Seattle Public Schools, you know, recently, and he sort of inherited the MAP test from the former superintendent. So I sort of feel for his position of being sort of forced into having to deal with something that he didn't bring in. So I want to say that up front. But it's ironic to me that he's saying this is about students when, you know, several of the concerns that Jesse just raised, for instance, you know, access to resources, testing being a civil rights issue, are also about students. And so, you know, it just strikes me as odd that he would frame it that way when a lot of the concerns that the teachers are raising clearly are about students and student learning. You know, they want their instructional time back for students. They want a test. They want a test. They want an assessment that is going to be useful for them. And particularly at the high school level, we're seeing that the MAP test is not useful for their instruction. It's not clear that it's a valid and sort of reliable measure for high school level teaching. There's also been recent studies that have come out that have said, for instance, that at the 4th and 5th grade level, even the MAP is not accurately is not showing any improvement. The MAP test isn't showing an improvement for reading instruction at the 4th and 5th grade level. So, you know, I think the test boycott is actually about students and doing what's best for students and taking an ethical stance. You know, that shows that teachers are professionals and caring, and they want to do what's best for their students.
Well,
and so,
I want to turn then to school principal, author, and TV host Steve Perry, who's the founder of Capital Preparatory Magnet School. Perry says teachers who object to standardized tests are trying to avoid accountability.
What they're trying to do is they're trying to skirt the responsibility of accountability. This examination, like so many others, probably has some flaws, as most examinations do, as the examinations that they give in their own classrooms do. In fact, if we look at some of the real data, we find that American students are at the bottom third in virtually every international comparison. Why? Because all we do is depend upon the opinion of one teacher, as opposed to a standardized examination, which tells us what children can do.
Professor Waynow, your response.
Yeah, it makes me laugh. For one, the international comparison, he actually doesn't understand or isn't actually portraying that correctly. There was a very recent study by Carnot and Rothstein that showed that if you compare international test scores and you account for poverty, you can actually find that U.S. students compare quite well to the highest performing countries around the world. And so making that, like, his perspective on that actually doesn't read that test data correctly.